Hey everybody, I'm catching up on Thursday afternoon. Gosh, I just had my window up here somewhere. Um, oh, where was I at? Yeah, come on, where's Google Chrome? Maybe soon owned by Perplexity. I thought that was an interesting thing. Um, so did a very interesting event last night with some VCs out of Miami and some really cool startups out at the Buffalo Ranch in Issaquah. That was really fun to attend. Learned lots. Today, in the tools that I'm using, I wanted to talk. This is something that Ramsey, you and I just talked about, and this is really just kind of for friends here that are hanging out and doing some coding. I've noticed that I'm spending a ton of money on different subscriptions, and I don't track them carefully enough. And so I've been thinking about this problem, and I was talking to some friends at StackTune. In fact, I'm going to meet with Oli next week, who's a friend of mine who does a very cool startup in the I have subscriptions and I want to manage them, I want to do onboarding. Worth looking at a winner of a local Seattle startup competition based in Seattle in the Ukraine. So I used Replit to do prototyping as I often do. And I started probably 2 weeks ago on this, but I got interested really about 3 or 4 days ago. So I built something called Auth Manager. By the way, this is just an idea. This is a prototype, like lots of things I do here on the channel. Not ready for prime time, but it is an interesting idea. So the idea would be I use Google to log into nearly everything. Google doesn't have a super awesome API for allowing me to track all the different subscriptions that I use, right? So this basically connects to the Google API on Google Cloud, looks at my archives, which is about 6,000 emails for the last some number of years. So I'm going to go ahead and connect to Google with my bobrap at gmail.com account. Okay. This, by the way, is why I'm making this a private share just for friends here that are working on similar problems. Um, and then I'm going to use a test account that I've set up in GCP to go ahead and it's called the auth submanager. So I'm going to go ahead and give it one-time permission, and I also always enforce two-factor auth when I'm working with something like financial data, encryption, other best practices. So vibe coding should be vibrant coding, right? We should be doing best practices all the time of how we encrypt data and all the things that we've done over the last say 50, 60, 70 years. So this is a one-time code. It doesn't work after this video here. So, and then I'm going to go ahead and connect and use that auth code. And what you'll see is that I have something called a subscription auditor. And the subscription auditor allows me to import data, switch to a demo account, and it says that my monthly total for spending is $21,000. Now, the good news is, praise Buddha, it's not really that because the high spending alert was actually for some work I was doing with some teams on the Amazon cloud. And although I did pay for that, and unfortunately probably paid taxes on that, this was probably a couple years ago. We were testing something out for folks in the financial services space. So that was in fact what was that 130 grand. The good news is that those aren't true. But I'll show you what it actually does, and I really like the logic here. Um, and I spent some time thinking about it. So I'm using Chat GPT-4 because I wanted to use a less expensive model. Um, and actually, five kind of improves this, but not much. I've also tried it with Claude. I've tried it with um, some of the Gemini bits and some of the other tools, but it's kind of all the same. So it's really just looking at 10 different AI patterns that seem to be sensible. I've got about 5,900 emails in my archive. I don't know how you guys do it, but if I find an email important, I save it in an archive. It processed five mails. Now, by the way, the one thing I'd like to improve on the counter here is that it didn't show me all the emails. It's already processed because I haven't added that logic. And I did, of course, security testing, privacy, all the stuff that we talked about. If you're interested in that topic, go to the Vibe coding, the Vibe rant coding. So I have a rant about good prepend and postpend and how you set good examples of how we set up UX and UA and CI/CD and all the things that we've always known from software engineering. But what's interesting about this is that it shows me that I've got some really high spend, right? It thinks that cloud storage is kind of crazy. Bunch of duplicate services. Now, because I did the date range of the last, I think, 4 years, I did on purpose a date range that's way too inclusive so I can show. But it says I've got all sorts of things. And by the way, many of these things I didn't know I had, and some of them are still true. I still pay for Dropbox. Who knew? Like, I haven't used Dropbox in a couple of years. I was using it with someone somewhere. I do pay, by the way, twice for all of my iCloud stuff because I have an Apple account in iCloud. I've got some domains, I've got Carbon, I got all kinds of crazy stuff here. And so what's interesting about this is this was an easy thing that I could do in Replit. I love Replit for prototyping. By the way, I probably like Lovable, V0, Windsurf, Copilot for GitHub and others more for sort of ongoing coding. But this is this is interesting. I didn't know that I Bitmar all in one streaming platform I still pay for. Not entirely sure why. I've got a political organization, Emily's List, that I give to as a progressive, which I'm glad I give to it, but I didn't know. I haven't used Weight Watchers in years. So thinking about this is how do we kind of improve the idea? The other one is I was able to come up with this prototype very, very quickly. And by the way, the other concept, which I'd love to talk about a lot, is just because you can do it fast doesn't mean you should do it. Maybe you shouldn't do it at all. Maybe you should go baseline delta improvement. Maybe you see what the quality standard is because there's a bunch of code here I didn't generate, and all code, in my view, should be reviewed by a human who knows what they're doing before it obviously it's accepted as production code. I did a bunch of things here that I'm liking. I took some of the ideas and I cross-pollinated them with different LLMs. I did what's called LLM coaching. So look at this and improve it. A lot of the UX stuff, I've started to use UX tools. I use Chat PRD to do some of the product definition. Stuff I can share in another at another time, another place. But I really like Replit. I think it's one of the most fun tools for this sort of quick and dirty stuff. I'm not sure I like it as much for production because there's some issues around production about how Replit deploys and how they charge. But it's a good tool in your tool chain. Hope you're having a good Thursday. Hope you're using the tools that are cools. You're following the rules. And if not, go to schools. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you. Take care.